Hello my dear students, welcome back to this class. This is Jayashree. I hope every one of you is safe and sound staying at home. Today in this video class, I am going to tell you a story. Isn't that interesting? Because some of you might have the habit of listening to stories every day. Some of you might even be pestering your parents or grandparents to tell you a story every day. For all those students who like stories, this is the video for them. I'm going to tell you a beautiful story, but it will be in the form of a ballad. What is a ballad? Ballad is actually uh, a song, but it narrates a story in short stanzas. Ballad actually it is a song, but it is divided into short stanzas and it will be telling us a story. Generally, it will be set to some kind of music, and this is a part of folk culture. Whatever the ballads, these ballads are passed on to generations orally. They are passed on to generations orally, and they are part of folk culture. Today, we are going to learn a ballad which is titled A Legend of the Northland. A Legend of the Northland. Let's get started with that. So, this is the legend of the Northland. I want you to have a good look at all these beautiful short stanzas. You can see uh, four-line stanzas, right? These are all the stanzas. Yes. So, ballad is actually a song narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballads are actually a part of folk culture and they are passed on orally from one generation to the next. Today, we are going to learn such a ballad. It is titled A Legend of the Northland, and it was written by Phoebe Carey. It was written by Phoebe Carey. Let's get started with that. The Legend of the Northland. Let's try to understand the title first. Let's get started from the title. What do you mean by a legend? Don't you tell me that it's the name of a movie. Please don't tell me that. A legend means old traditional story. A legend means old traditional story. And what could be Northland referring to? What part of the earth could be the Northland? If you're good with geography, generally you could guess this. The Northland could refer to any extremely cold country in the Earth's north polar region, such as Greenland and northern regions of Russia, Canada, Norway, etc. So these are all extremely cold places. So they are referred to Northland. So let's see. I hope you have already learnt what a ballad is. So it's time for us to know more about our poetess. Who is our poetess? Phoebe Carey. There is something very interesting about this woman. I would like to share that with you all today. Let's know more about her. Phoebe Carey was actually born on September 4th in 1824 and she died on July 31st in 1871. And she was an American poetess and the younger sister of poetess Elise Carey. And they are popularly known as Carey sisters actually. Elise Carey and Phoebe Carey. And let's know what happened in their life. The sisters' mother died in 1835, and 2 years afterwards, their father married again. What happened in their life was a great tragedy. She was born in 1824 and she lost her mother in 1835. By the time she lost her mother, she was quite young. But what happened after 2 years, her father married again. But stepmother wasn't very generous with these kids. So they had to face a lot of difficulties. What happened? Sometimes the sisters were not even allowed to use candles to study when the family retired for the day. You see, when everybody retires for the day in the family, these two sisters wanted to study. When they wanted to study, they need to use candles at night, but they are not allowed to use candles. What happened then? You know what happened? They were so determined to study that they found different ways. If not the candle, let us make one, they thought, and they made. Using what you know? You will be surprised. They used to use a saucer of lard with a bit of rag for a wick for light. You know what lard means? It's the fat of cattle actually, like pig and all. So they took the fat of that animals, cattle, in a saucer, and old piece of cloth, rag, a bit of rag for the wick for light. What do you understand from this actually? Say, look at the sisters. They were actually in a lot of distress, but they made their way and they had become famous. They both had printed many poems together, and later they individually got their books printed. So, this is about Phoebe Carey, and I want all of you to understand how determined they are. Hmm? Okay, let's continue. Let's get started with stanza 1. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they can't sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few. Away, away, far away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few. You understand this. In the winter season, generally we experience the nights to be longer than the daytime, right? So, just like that, there, the hours of the day are few, but the nights seem to be longer in the winter. They are very long that they can't sleep them through. They can't sleep throughout the night since the nights are longer compared to days in the Northland. Right, next. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows. And the children look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. You see, that is the Northland, how that could look like. When I say Northland, I do not mean any one particular place, the colder region of that area, right? Where they harness the swift reindeer. You know reindeer, right? You can see in this picture that is a reindeer, and it is very swift actually. It is very quick, right? To the sledges. You can see in that picture itself the sledge, right? This is the sledge. Sledge is actually that is being pulled by a reindeer over there, and generally sledges are used as vehicles uh, to be pulled by these reindeers in snow or on ice. And the children look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. In the Northland, the children they'll be like that. You can look at the picture. Due to the extreme cold there, they'll be covered in furry clothes, which make them look funny, like bear cubs. You can see this is a cub of a bear, and you can see the kids over there, and they look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. Let's move on to the third stanza. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once, when this good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, what happened? They tell them a curious story, one interesting story. They tell them there to the children of the Northland. I don't believe it's true. The poetess herself does not believe that the story is true. And yet, you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. But yet, she wants to share that story with us so that we learn a lesson. We're going to learn a lesson from this beautiful story, it seems. So that's why she wants to tell that story, that tale to us. Let's listen to that. It is started like this. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching, just as he did, Once, there was one good Saint Peter. You can see he is Saint Peter. Who is Saint Peter? You might have an idea. He is uh, one of the apostles of Jesus Christ. Apostle is nothing but a disciple. He was one of the disciples of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is said to have 12 disciples, and he was one among them. Saint Peter was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. What does he do? He actually preaches. He goes to different places spreading the message of Lord Jesus Christ. So what happened? He was walking, he was preaching, he was spreading the message of Jesus Christ. As he did, that's what he did. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her for her store of cakes to give him a single one. What happened? He came to the door of a cottage. Uh, since morning he was walking, and he was on fast. He stopped at the door of a small cottage. In traveling round the earth, he was traveling round the earth where a little woman was making cakes. He stopped at the door of a small cottage, and in that cottage there was a little woman, and she was actually making cakes and baking them on the hearth. That is hearth, the fireplace that you can see. And being faint with fasting, as he was on fast since morning, as he did not eat anything from the morning, he felt weak. He felt very weak. So what did he do? For the day was almost done. It's almost late. It's almost night. He asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Saint Peter stopped at that door and asked this little woman to give him one cake from her store of cakes. She actually had a lot of cakes. She baked a lot of cakes and she kept all of them there. So he asked her, please give me a piece of cake. But what happened? Did the woman give the cake? Let's see. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Therefore she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. What happened? Actually, she has a lot of cakes in her store, but she did not give any one from those. Instead, she tried to bake another cake because, you might guess, all those cakes seemed very big for her to give away. So, she wanted to make another smaller cake and then she can give that. So what happened? She made a very little cake. But as it baking lay, when it was being baked, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Actually, she made a very little cake, but when it was being baked, when she looked at it, it looked bigger to give away. It looked too large for her to give away. So what did she do? She did not give away that also. She kept it in the store of her cakes. Then what happened? Therefore she needed another. She needed another cake. Kneading. So massaging the dough with the palm of your hand, right? And still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. What happened? She needed another, and she made another smaller cake. You have to understand that it is a smaller cake. That means definitely smaller than the last one. And she looked at it. When she turned the cake over, when she looked at it, it looked as large as the first one. It looked as large as the first one for her. So that's why, what did she do? Did she at least give this cake? Let's see. It looked large for her. That's why, what did she do? She did not give that also. She put it back in the store of her cakes. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough, you know, tiny scrap, a little amount she took from the dough and rolled it flat. You know, cakes would not be flat actually, right? But she rolled and rolled with the rolling pin, uh, and it made it flat, and baked it thin as a wafer. It was like a wafer, it was not like a cake, wafers, right? But she could not part with that. The interesting thing is, she took a tiny scrap of dough and she rolled it flat and she baked it. It was like a wafer, it was not like a cake, but she could not even give that away. But she could not even give that away. What happened? What did she say? For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. You know what she said? My cakes that seem too small. When I eat my cakes, they look very small. But when I want to give that to someone, they look very large. And then she put that on the shelf. Even that tiny wafer like cake she did not like to give, and she put it on the shelf. You see, that wafer like cake, and she put it back in that store of cakes. Then what happened? Then good Saint Peter grew angry. What happened? For she was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. So, this good Saint Peter, he became angry. And what did he do? He was actually very hungry and he was very weak. So, he had become angry. And what did he say? And surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. She actually made Saint Peter very angry. What happened then? He said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form. You are too selfish to live in a human form. You have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. You have food, you have shelter, and you have fire to keep you warm. You have everything. But what doesn't she have? What doesn't she have? You might identify. See, she has a lot of food to eat, she has a good shelter, and she has a fire to keep her warm. But this lady doesn't she seem to have one thing: generosity. Let's see what happened next. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. You know what happened? You shall build as the birds do. What did Saint Peter say? You are too selfish to live like a human, and you shall build as the birds do. You have fire, you have shelter, you have food. Now, what will happen to you? You have to build your own home just like the birds do, and you shall get your scanty food, very little food, by a lot of hard work, by boring and boring and boring, by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. You have to bore and bore for a long time for a scanty, for a little amount of food in the dry, hard wood. He said like that. Then up she went through the chimney. Up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word. The woman never spoke a word again. And out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. So from that home, from the chimney, woodpecker has flown. You can see woodpecker there in that picture. Saint Peter seemed to have changed the woman into a woodpecker, and now the woodpecker has to bore and bore and bore to get the scanty food in the dry hard wood, right? She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, and all the rest of her clothes were burned black as a coal in the flame. You can see the woodpecker there, it is pecking there, it is actually boring the wood, and its head is in scarlet color, bright red color. The woman actually, when she was baking cakes, had a scarlet cap on her head, and it remained like that, and all the rest of her clothes burned, and they had become black. See, so that's why the woodpecker looks like that. It has a scarlet cap on the head, and it's in black color. And every country school boy has seen her in the wood where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. And every country school boy has seen her in the woods. Every country school boy. Now all the country school boys, all the village school boys actually see this woodpecker, where she lives in the trees till this very day. She lives in the trees, who the woodpecker, and boring for wood. So this is our beautiful poem. I hope you have enjoyed listening to this. Have you enjoyed listening to this? Okay. With that, I'm going to end this video, and we shall meet in the next video. Before that, I want you to read this poem as many times as you please to do. See you in the next video. Till then, take care, stay home, stay safe.